Hello and welcome to another episode of Inspired Women Gathering Show. This is a show that talks about all things from life, relationships, spirituality, business, and everything in between. Women inspire me through their stories, their resilience, resourcefulness, tenacity, and the powerful movement that we make in the world. I love connecting and having deep conversations, sharing with you the women I am so blessed to know and who inspire me, especially as we navigate together through this deep unknowing time. My name is Dixie Bennett. I'm your host, and I'm a soulful women and wealth coach and healer, and I created this platform to highlight amazing women who I come across and connect with. I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. I'm so excited to introduce you my wonderful guest, Melanie Taylor, and our topic today is Awakening Your Inner Strength. As a child, Melanie felt like she was the reason everyone around her was in pain. So she tried really, really hard to be perfect in every way. That led to constant judgment, burnout, and disconnection from her body. She experienced anxiety, depression, pain, and self-loathing, and she knows how to overcome and be free from the suffering they bring. Her journey and the journey she takes her students and clients on is one of reclaiming ourselves and awakening our inner strength. Together, you'll discover how to come back home to our bodies in gentle, loving ways that fit for each other, that fit for each of us uniquely. She is a stand for waging peace in the war of our bodies, minds, and souls, and she is here for you. Thank you, Melanie, so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So where in the world are you today?
Well, our business is here in Airdrie, Alberta, Canada. And what we do here is we have a holistic training space where we predominantly teach yoga teacher training and other holistic modalities like Reiki, coaching holistically as well.
Beautiful. So tell me a little bit more about how you got into the draw to yoga and creating this holistic practice.
Absolutely. So this actually started for me. I was just about 16 years old, and I had no idea what it would turn into later. What happened initially was I had been through a very traumatic event, and a close friend of mine saw me struggling and invited me to my very first yoga class. And more so in not really knowing how to help me, but knowing that she felt really good there and knowing she was cared for by the teacher there. So I went to yoga class with her. And what that began was somebody that really supported me, this beautiful woman that taught that class that really took me under her wing and supported me through my healing journey and connecting me into yoga, even though I had no idea what she was doing. And then just coming on to my 40th birthday, I began to face burnout and illness and just continuing disconnecting from my own well-being and upset, and my depression was at an all-time high. My health was at an all-time low. And I started to really look at what was going on in my life and what I was doing and what was working and what wasn't. And I kept coming back to yoga. And I had been doing yoga ever since that day and just really never asked myself the question, why do I do yoga? So 20 plus years later, I finally was on my mat, and for whatever reason, just in that moment, I said, why am I on my mat? Why do I love it here? And after a whole lot of crying and snot landing on my mat, what I really got was that was the one place that I felt like me. Like I actually put away all the labels, all the judgments, all the crap, and I could just be me in my body, and everything was okay in that moment. And so wasn't that surprising to me that when people asked me to do something other than go to my yoga class, I got snarky with them for 20 years. So that reconnection brought me back to, I retook my yoga teacher training then, started delving deeper and deeper into yoga and why it was working for me to try to understand it. 5 or 6 years later, of doing that really allowed me to connect with, this is the part that I want people to get. I want people to understand why. What works for them works, and why what doesn't work for them doesn't work. And that became the foundation of my business. When I say awakening my inner strength, all of that was already within me. I just didn't know, and I didn't know that I had that piece within me, and that I could reach out for it anytime. And that's really what I want people to be able to connect to, and that's the foundation of everything we do.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Why do I get on the mat? So you also mentioned that you help people kind of understand what they can do and what they can't do. So how do you work with people in that way?
I think there's three things that really foundationally break down what our work looks like. The first is being able to be with our breath. And if we can connect with how our breath feels in any moment, doing anything, it's an insight into everything we need to know. So if you're doing something that isn't supporting you, typically it'll affect your breath. And if you're doing something that is supporting you, it will also affect your breath. So we start with that, helping people to really just identify how their nervous system is doing through recognizing how their breath is showing up for them. So that's one of the first things we work on, is getting people to understand what a peaceful parasympathetic breath feels like, whether that's through yoga, meditation, Thai massage, doesn't really matter what the modality is to really be able to connect with that. That for some people is enough, actually, to really have that foundation of recognizing how they're doing and reconnecting that mind-body connection. The second thing we work with when there's more needed from that is we work in movement, whether that be yoga movement or just intuitive movement or massage. Movement allows us to shift what's stuck in our bodies, what has resided in there from not knowing. And when I say that on my yoga mat there was a bunch of tears, I was in a wide-legged forward fold, and it's like everything unraveled at once. I could feel my whole body unraveling, and the teacher that was there at the time, who I also knew, was such a beautiful person, just completely held space. She just brought a box of tissue and stuck it on the corner of my mat and walked away and just let me be with it and let snot pour out of my nose onto my mat. Like, it just didn't matter. But physically and emotionally, everything was releasing in that time. And so when we allow people to be with movement, allow them to be with sensation, not painful movement, but sensation movement, to really lean into what's there, then they can start to notice where they're holding tension. When we understand where we're holding tension and how the breath is doing, again, this is another way to recognize when you're living your authentic life and what you want to be doing and when you're not. When you're not, you're going to feel inflammation and you're going to feel your breath adjust. And when you are, you're going to feel the same thing. You're going to feel that release of tension and your breath release. So that's the second thing that we do. And the last one is really around awareness. And, yes, there's some awareness already built in with the breath and the movement piece, but it's knowing what we notice when we're in it versus knowing and looking for what we're not seeing, looking for where we do or don't connect with what's happening in our lives, and in the pandemic we're dealing with today, there's a lot of autopilot living, and that's why we're opening the fridge so often. It's why we're buying toilet paper, is that autopilot living. So when we start to look into awareness, to be able to see our patterns, when we see them, we can choose them or not. And then we can choose to transform them or not. And so those are the three foundations of all of our training, is to be with breath, movement, and awareness.
I love that. Breath, movement, and awareness. I love what you said, movement, sensation, right? Recognizes the sensations. And yes, breath. Breath is like one of the most important pieces, especially expanding consciousness, bringing awareness into the body, deepening in. I find most people are such shallow breathers. They struggle bringing it down into their body. And the autopilot living, oh my gosh. So how can somebody recognize when they're in autopilot living?
Well, there's a couple things. The first that would come to mind is that you don't recognize what you're up to. I mean, if you think about, I was doing this once and it was so funny. So I had been working in Red Deer. So I live in Airdrie, so just north of Calgary. And I'd been working in Red Deer for about 1.5 years. And so every day I'd get in my car and I would drive to the highway and I would take the highway going northbound. And then I had moved and I was now going into Calgary. And the first morning that I was supposed to go into Calgary, I got in my car and I got my cup of tea and my music's going and I drive and I turn onto the highway to go north to Red Deer. And it's that moment when we're not conscious, like we're just doing. And this is so common. And even when we set up structure for ourselves, we may adjust and change the structure. So we might decide to meditate in the morning, to not look at our phone until noon. Like, there's things that we'll put in place that are super powerful and really helpful. And then we become autopilot in the new structure. So we just do those things. We're not consciously doing them. We're just doing them. So the first way to be aware of that is when you just find yourself doing something and you don't remember what you did before that, unless it's part of your structure. So that's a powerful way. But I think that the biggest thing, and the one that I find most commonly connects with people, is when we start to look at how we numb in our behaviors. So if we start to look at, what do I do when I'm in pain and suffering or upset? How do I look at those? Because those are much easier to see. When I do not want to deal with the world outside and Netflix gets turned on and I'm on session like season 4, episode 22 of something, then yeah, there's that autopilot behavior, right? So it's easier to see those. It's easier to see when upset comes, what's the first thing you go to. And when you start to become aware of that, you can start to become aware of things you do even when you're feeling good. Like, do I get up and get right on my mat? And recognizing that that's still a pattern, and I can do that in an autopilot way, or I can get on my mat and I can connect into my breath and start to feel my breath, and then allow the breath to move me through my practice. That's that awareness, that mindful way of doing things. So yeah, and it depends on the person. I mean, we've disconnected so much from our bodies and that mind-body connection, because there is so much external things going on around us, that it can take something to really bring that back inside. So however it shows up for people, whatever the best way is for them to get connected to it, is the one that works.
So what might be some ideas or suggestions that, especially because now, we're some people are in a month of isolation at this point. Some people are in a couple weeks of isolation, depending where they are. What are some practices or some things, some aspects that they could bring into their daily life to start shifting from autopilot into more presence? I think this is the gift of time, is that we get to come back home and connect with ourselves a little bit more, and we have the time to do it. So what could be, what might be some ideas or suggestions that people could implement in their homes right away?
Yeah, I think one of the first ones is connecting with your breath more often. When I first started really deepening into this, one of my mentors said, I want you to set an alarm on your phone every hour. And every hour you're going to spend 5 minutes just connecting with your breath and like feeling where it is and listening to your nervous system, which seemed like a really silly thing to do. I mean, I'm going to listen to my breath for 5 minutes. But the difference it made was palpable, because what I started to become aware of was during the different times of the day, where my heart rate was at, what my breath was doing. And I could really easily tie it into what I was up to in that last hour. So if my breath got more shallow, or I couldn't connect it into my belly, or if it felt tight up in the upper chest, those feelings of anxiety, of tightness or heaviness, I could start to recognize, oh, well, what was I working on? Oh, I was working on budgeting and finances. Okay, that's where the anxiety feeling's coming from. That's what my body is saying, is, oh, there might be some fear or some scarcity or all of that there. So I was able to connect in. So that's, a really quick and easy one, is whether it's every hour, every couple hours, twice a day, once a day, whatever you could fit in, listening into where your breath is at. Is really powerful. I found by doing it every hour, it connected me to, there was a point where I stopped having to have it in my phone. Like, I was remembering to do it before my phone went off.
Okay.
The other thing, really looking at how much we put together at once. I was at this amazing talk with a man named Will Maher, and he wrote a book called Save the World and Still Be Home by Dinner. And my favorite line of the entire week with him is, multitasking is stupid. And he just said it over and over, how much time we spend, eating our lunch in front of our emails. And just, if we can separate those things down and do one thing at a time, we can start to recognize the impact that one thing is having on us. So that's 2 things I would do right away. And if you wanted to really dive in, a body scan is a great one. There's some great free body scans on our website at lifewellness.ca, so you can use those or any body scan that you find. But really just spend 5 minutes and listen. Go from your toes to your nose and just listen to every part of your body and see what's happening there. And just listen. And you may find no sensation, and you may find sensation, and both are perfect. So just that, taking that time to be within and listening into your body and your breath really does help to slow down that autopilot living. You become more conscious. Oh, there's some back pain in my mid back today. You're going to be aware of it throughout the day and notice what's making it worse and notice what's making it better. And that's right there. That's that turning off the autopilot. Maybe I need to shift my chair or adjust the way that I'm sitting. Little things like that make such a difference.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Well, and the body talks, especially, oh, I froze up there. Can you hear me still?
I sure can, yeah.
Okay, we'll just go with it.
Okay.
Just connecting more into our body and just listening to what our body has to say, connecting to our breath, bringing that quietness and that awareness, and even just stopping for a couple moments a day makes a world of difference. And just bringing deeper awareness. So what rituals do you have for a daily practice that just keeps you motivated and keeps your mind and your vibrations high?
Well, I will start with sleep because I think that how our day ends is how our day begins. So the most important thing for me, especially in everything we're dealing with, our nervous systems are so over run right now with emotion and fear and all the things that are happening in the news. So, really protecting my sleep is super, super important. That for me, I needed specific 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours and 30 minutes is too much. 7 hours and a half is not enough. So for me, it's really making sure that that time is protected, that my room is comfortable, that my devices aren't near me, or there's not things that are going to wake me up through the night. So whatever that looks like for you, for me, that's a bit of mindful, very slow-paced restorative yoga before I go to bed, maybe even a yoga nidra or a meditation before bed, to really allow my mind to settle. I'm a very active mind kind of girl, so if I don't protect that time, I don't end up with the sleep that I want. I end up with a very active mind throughout my sleep. So I get up in the morning, and the first thing that I do is I get out my journal. It's always beside my bed. And, I tend to wake up with a lot of thoughts, worrying. And if I don't write them down right away, I can't just put them aside. So I might come up with some idea for my business or something when I first wake up, or something for a family member or for a friend, or something for me, or where I want to take my summer vacation. Whatever that is, I get it just written down so I can just allow my mind to settle. And then I get on my mat. It's exactly 3 feet from my bed. So I get onto my mat and just, again, allow myself to go through a body scan. What's needed? Is there any tension or inflammation in my body? And how do I release that before my day starts? I end that with a meditation. And then often I'll find a cup of tea and something for breakfast. And then once that's done, I start to sit down and I look at what are 3 things that I can do today to make a difference. And they are little, 3, small steps that I can take. And that's where I plan my day out. So, I always have my standard things I want list and things I want to do list. It's always right there, but I'll pull 3 things aside and really set up myself for a day of success. During my day, I make sure that I stop and celebrate those things that I do. I mean, it might have been one phone call that I made that I was afraid to make, or an ask that I was afraid to ask for, or something I've been resisting doing. Whatever that is that you're taking on that day, really take the time to connect with the difference it made. So for me, that's always hands over heart, and really just listening in for the difference it made. Whether it's small, whether it's massive, doesn't matter. Just taking time to connect with that. My hardest thing is turning it off. So I do have an alarm on my phone that's like, time to stop.
Wow.
And then join into my family. And, the evening is usually quiet. Or, hanging out together, reading a book, having a nice meal together. And then I go right back into that, preparing for sleep again.
Wow, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I love the 3 things today that make a difference. That's a powerful, powerful way of phrasing it. And then the celebrations and honoring it with your hands over the heart, just really sitting in that. I think that's one of the most important things. We quickly achieve all the things that we want to, but we don't actually spend enough time really celebrating and evaluating the things that we did accomplish. So I love that. What a beautiful day.
Yeah, it's remembering to do it. I mean, there are days where that's not how it looks, and
Mm-hmm.
those days typically don't show up as feeling like it's a successful day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about being able to lean into that and recognizing how did I veer off of that day, and the difference it made. It helps me reconnect into why this structure is so powerful, why it works for me, and it will work for me, and it might not work for someone else. But it's finding your own flow and what is it that makes whatever you accomplish that day, even if it was sometimes that day is not working. Is my
Mm-hmm.
one thing. I'm not going to do any work today. Connecting with my family, taking time for a walk. It might be something along those lines, but those are the three things that made a difference. It might be planning my food for the week. That's something that makes a difference. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, and setting aside the time to actually do it, I think, you know, a lot of people just kind of jump out of bed and rush into grabbing their phones and rushing into the next thing. I believe in easing into my day, I think is really important. And then celebrating and, actively putting these things into place that feel good. It's not another thing to do. It should feel good in your day.
yeah.
So tell me about a time, have you ever had a time where you kind of lost everything and you had to restart? Or did you experience anything that, especially in today's day, it's like everything kind of came to a screeching halt and we've definitely had to reset. Have you had a time in your life in the past that maybe helped prepare you for this time that we're experiencing? Or just a time to, really kind of come 360 and everything that you knew came to a stop and you needed to move forward in a different way?
Yeah, there's two predominant ones. We lived in New York during 9/11. We lived on Long Island.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, and so what we're dealing with right now, there's parts of it that are very like not being able to turn the news off, like things like that we're experiencing of needing to know, like, is anything changed in our community?
Mhm.
That one for sure had a big impact on gratitude and really being connected with what we did have, because we were around so much loss and so much sadness. Um, and the second one I kind of talked a little bit about earlier is coming up to my 40th birthday and having just a complete shutdown.
Mhm.
My mind was burned out. My body was definitely burned out. My digestion actually physically stopped functioning. So I got very, very sick, and it took me about a year to do both the physical healing was much easier. And I think that's the amazing part about our body, is that if you let it, if you give it the environment, it actually knows what to do. So I actually left my corporate career and started to reconnect into health and well-being, and at the same time starting to question. So that was when the moment happened on my mat. Actually, the next day I quit my job.
Wow.
And so for me, I've been in training and development my whole life. It's been part of my life. I mean, 15, 16 years old, I was mentoring and teaching and helping at school, and it's just always been part of who I've been, and in different ways. And so I, while what I do is actually the same. I'm still teaching. How I do it and the environment I create and what I set up for myself is what success looks like, is like completely in the opposite direction. It's not a 360. It is 100 a 180. Just literally turning around and going in the opposite direction, from a place of productivity and looking at what's not working constantly and trying to fix that, into a place of what is working and how do we support that and how do we add in something that's working, because who we are and how we live in the world is always going to be there, right?
Mhm.
The fact that we have cell phones is the fact that we have cell phones. It's a part of how we live and how our lives are structured. So saying I'm going to put away my cell phone and not use it is not realistic. But adding something to how I use it, or adding something new into my life that takes up time I would have used on my cell phone, it's just that different approach of how do I bring in something that's empowering and helpful for me, and that nothing's broken and it doesn't need to be fixed, because we are not broken. You
Mhm.
can't like cut me open and find the broken part of Mel to be fixed. So
Exactly.
um, yeah, so that, I mean, that's now, oh my goodness, 8 years ago. And that was the full swing of coming out of that corporate, fast-paced, deliver world into support and dealing with what people are really dealing with. Because, even in my work environment, when people weren't productive, there was something going on in their personal life that was in their way. When you help them with that, or when you help them get support for that, their productivity naturally happened. So I don't have to worry about that part. I can let other people deal with that part in the world now, and really just be with people and what suffering they're dealing with, and how to help them see their suffering in a new way, or see their strength to be able to deal with their suffering in a whole new way.
Yeah, no, I love that for sure. So how did you take care of your mindset, especially because you and I have that in common. We both were in corporate and we left and started these totally different holistic practices. How did you find your transition, and what did you do to work with yourself every day?
This is why it took a year. Like I said, the physical part was like 90 to 120 days. The first thing that I leaned into was what was working. And that's really why I got on my mat that day and was like, why do I love yoga? I started questioning everything. Why do I love to read? Why do I love hiking? And the parts that I did love about my corporate career, why did I love those things? So really for me, that was getting really connected with what mattered to me, connected to my values. And that work led everything past that. When I recognized what I was getting on my yoga mat, why that was working for me, why that mattered. And there was also parts of it that I didn't like, what was happening in the sales of yoga, and how it's projected to people and not available to so many. There was parts about it that didn't fit my values, and that could have led to where my business was created after that. But, really being with what did matter to me and why it mattered, and getting really, really centered on what were my core values, what were my core beliefs, challenging some of those beliefs. Initially being able to quit my job, like that was our status. Like I'd worked so hard for the career that I had and where I'd gotten it and the paycheck and like all of that. And then to realize that I had no values attached to any of that, but that's what I'd been working on. There was some healing to do there and some reconnecting.
Sure.
And so it started with that, really asking the why. And then whenever there was place where there was something that I couldn't quite find, or something just felt off, that's when I reached out for support. And so between therapy, doing trainings, holistic trainings, as I took my MBSR, my mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy, I took that program as well and started leaning into how do I help me. Took advice, and when somebody said try this or read that, I did, and slowly started to connect together what was disconnected, was inauthentic beliefs about what value was, what life was supposed to look like. I had to bust those all up and throw out the ones that weren't helpful.
Breaking down to build up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a daily thing. I have PTSD, so that's something that is consistently in my space, and it's being with that and recognizing what's needed today. So my question for myself, and the one I give my students and my clients, is what's one thing that would support what's so right now. So whatever is going on for you, whatever your experience is, whatever has happened, or however you're experiencing life in this moment, what's one thing that would support you? And that question has gotten me through a lot of dealing with things and being able to support myself and recognizing that I have the power to do that.
Very powerful. And the great questions, right? Why do I love what I'm doing? Why do I love yoga? What's one thing that's what supports what's so right now, right? So that brings very much bringing it into the presence, and then being able to shift that. Beautiful. So even I just want to go back to touch on, because you said you were in New York or Long Island with 9/11. And so how did you manage yourself coming through that? Like I couldn't imagine being in the city at that time, and even just watching it from afar. It was watching it on TV. It's that one of those times, in history that's kind of repeating now. Where were you when 9/11 hit? I could remember exactly that morning.
Yeah.
And just how life changed in a big way. And so what changed for you in that time?
Um, well, where I was, we were actually supposed to be in Manhattan that morning, and would have probably, I'm a planner, so when we plan days, it's usually like, well, I'm actually much less of that now than I was in that particular year of my life, but I had like everything, we'll get off the train at this time, we'll go here, we'll get this there, we'll do that there. So what I know is that had we have gone through that day, it's very likely would have been in the observation deck of the tower.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we weren't. We woke up that morning and my son had a bit of the sniffles, and we decided to stay home and crawl back into bed. And so where I was actually in bed when the phone rang, my husband calling from his job not far from where we lived and letting us know what was going on. So yeah, how did I deal with that? So what changed for me is feeling safe in the world. You know, up until that point of my life, stuff had happened, you know, like I shared that, you know, I went through an assault early in my life, and that, you know, as all of us do, we go through things. But none of it ever really made me feel like the world wasn't safe. And on that morning, that really changed for me. I remember being scared to turn the news off, scared to have the news on. And the part that really got me the most, my daughter was taking Irish dance classes. It was kind of our get on the train and we'd go to her classes and come back once a week, and just this fun little excursion we did. And the class was actually that day, and so of course that was canceled, and it was canceled for quite a while. And the first time that I got on the train after that to go out to her dance class, the trains inside were covered with missing posters. And the conductors would come through and like take your money and do your ticket thing. And they were carrying tape with them, and they would fix the posters as they started to peel off the glass, because of course it's out in the sun, so tape doesn't stick to glass very well. And that went on for a month or two. And then after that, as they would start to peel off more and more, they would neatly fold them up, put them in their pocket. This was all part of, for me, that was probably one of the most traumatic moments, was recognizing like, oh, those people are actually lost. So that took about 2 or 3 months. So the first, I would say probably the first 6 months was very traumatic. And I would say that there was nothing that I was doing at the time that was actually helping me heal or let it go. I was very much caught, or I'd say stuck in the weeds of it. And the news was on 24/7. Like even while I was sleeping, it was on. And just really not a very good, healthy time for me. So part of what we had to recognize was that I actually needed actual help. That, you know, speaking with family and the things that we would normally do to support ourselves wasn't enough. So I did go to therapy. And, you know, I was really blessed in that the therapist that I had at the time really was also sharing what he was going through and how he was dealing with it. I mean, here's nothing like burning out therapists than having something that everybody needs therapy for all at one time. And being able to recognize in that moment that here's someone that has all of the tools and all of the knowledge to support themselves, and they're struggling. Oh, and that moment flipped everything for me. Is like, oh, actually we all suffer. So this was at that, we actually moved back to Canada not long after that. Within about a year, we moved back to Canada. My husband's from New York. That's why we were living there in the first place. He's from Long Island. So we moved back to Canada, and how I actually dealt with my own healing was I started doing research on stress and understanding what we were going through and experiencing. For me, that's always when I can normalize it, when I can understand that I'm not alone in it. That's been a big part of my healing journey. And so, yeah, again, it's another moment that created what I eventually brought into a business, was these moments that adjusted my life. You know, the moment on my yoga mat, the moment at 15 on my yoga mat was the first one. And I just didn't know where it was taking me. And as much as I don't want to ever go through another 9/11 again, and I wish I wouldn't have had to, that the whole world wouldn't have had to, what it connected me to for who I am able to be today in the world, and normalizing experiences of stress with people, that's powerful. And so I wouldn't give it up because of that.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for that story. And yes, we're all suffering. You know, everybody, every healer, every every experience. You know, the tools are there to be used, but it's also so important just to give ourselves permission to feel, just to feel into what is in this moment now.
Yeah.
And so how do you think all of those experiences prepared you for what we're going through in the world now?
Mm. Interesting question. I think that what's there for me is that what I'm experiencing is normal, and what others are experiencing is normal. And I think the part that maybe has me agitated or upset with what's going on in the world right now is that it's 2020 and we haven't learned to be with other people's suffering yet. That we shame them for buying too much toilet paper, or we shame them for not buying too much toilet paper, which sounds really silly. And you know, I don't want to make light of it. It is a flocking response in the nervous system to fight or flight, and we do it because we don't know what else to do. And if somebody else is doing it, I don't know what to do. Maybe that's what I need to do to keep me safe. It is a very natural human response to stress. And I think what's there for me is that the work that I want to be doing in the world, which is helping people recognize that, you know what, stress actually is helpful. We actually need it. We don't need this much of it, but we do need it. And that when we can find healthy ways to release the stress that we're dealing with and recognize it in stress, that's where our power is. That's that inner strength we actually have, is that we can be with it. What I'm seeing right now is that my work isn't done.
And
for
sure.
And that collectively we can come together for that. So what I'm hopeful is, you know, there's some really beautiful things happening right now. Like the world is healing. You can see that in nature and the environment restoring itself. In the small amount of time we've been indoors, to see the difference that nature's having. And I think that if we allow ourselves to be in that place of rest and be with and experience things and acknowledge that there's an impact on us, if we could just do that in this moment and allow others to do the same and honor that, and just be with them without telling them how to fix it or what to change or how you're doing something smarter or better, or that you should, you know, go out and learn a new language or become the version of yourself you wanted to be in this time. If we could just stop all of that and just be with, wow, as a human being, our job is to suffer. That's, I think, the opportunity. So, you know, when I feel down about it, or when I have a moment of like, I really just want to be on a mountain hiking, or do my yoga outside, that I can connect with the fact that we're in an opportunity moment, and opportunity moments are uncomfortable, and sometimes they don't feel fair. 9/11 didn't feel fair. Being assaulted didn't feel fair. But what came out of that is something I wouldn't give up a moment of it for. So that's what I'm really present to right now, and what's possible. And part of that is educating ourselves of, you know, again, how we experience stress, what we're going through with stress, and how to reframe that into something helpful, and how to release it, because that's the biggest part. How do we release the stress we're experiencing so it doesn't end up in our body chronically?
Exactly. Oh, beautifully, beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. And how has your business changed since we've been in this pandemic?
How has it not changed? You know, I have a lot of value around one-to-one, or like one-to-many, one-to-group teaching, and being in the room with people. And so initially, what first went up with me is like, my business is over. There's no way to do this. But what I love about human beings is how resilient we are, and how problem solving, you know, we always want to fix something, and how that really has been helpful. And just seeing myself and other people be able to figure out what does work is so amazing. So I've learned a lot about my business and what is workable. So we've taken all of our trainings online with the exception of one, and that particular training is a hands-on teaching people Thai massage for couples. So that doesn't work to be online, and I'm okay with that. So, you know, we're looking at different things we can do to maybe restructure that at some point, but all of our other trainings we've taken online, including yoga teacher training. So thank goodness for Zoom. A little Zoom commercial there. And I think also people, it takes something for people to be at their computer. I mean, it's a 10-hour teaching day. So for them to be at their computer and be present and create that space has been such an amazing opportunity to recognize what it takes to create space.
Beautiful.
And that's predominantly, that is the biggest lesson I've had in all of this when it comes to my business, is that the space that we create matters, and we can create it anywhere if we're authentic with what we're creating.
Yeah. Yes, creating a sacred space is an art in itself, but it can be done, it can be taken absolutely anywhere. Yeah, just being resilient and problem solving and turning, right? Shifting gears into something that, it does feel awkward, and maybe it will be for temporary, right? We don't really know where we're at, but I think that's the biggest takeaway right now, is just to be resilient and, put your focus on something, give it a try, just try it. And you never know, it might actually work, or it might take off.
Totally. Yeah, I think that there's so many things we're going to learn differently about how life can work. And what a great opportunity to challenge every way of being we have and look at what else might be workable. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any quotes or anything that you kind of like to focus on that keeps you in the right mindset? Inspires you?
One of my favorite quotes, and this sounds really funny coming from somebody who teaches yoga teacher training, Rod Stryker, who is one of my biggest mentors and someone that influences me and challenges me a lot. We have some ways that we think alike and some ways that we think differently, so he's always a great place to challenge me. He says, "The world does not need any more yoga teachers, it needs more people doing yoga." And when I put that together with that thought of those who can't do teach, which I've always hated that thought, that there are people that are meant to teach it, and there are people that are meant to be doing it, and both are honorable ways of being. But when I think about, for myself and holding myself true to the space I'm creating, is that if I'm not prepared to do the work, I'm not prepared to teach the work. And that has really kept me honest in that. And I'm in what we're teaching and the way that we approach yoga, very holistically and back to its roots about what yogic living really does look like, and taking away the judgment and taking away all the stuff that gets in the way of it. That's really what that's about, is like being able to be on our mat and doing the work for ourselves. And the world really does need more people living a life of authenticity and integrity and self-love and compassion. And if we had that, the world would change. So it is something that I read every morning, and I allow it to sort of look at what are my 3 things going to look like. Part of that is how am I practicing for myself and keeping myself very true to my values and my dharma, or my purpose for being here.
I love that. Beautiful and beautifully shared. Yes, I think, it's always comes back down to, some people call it mindfulness, I call it presence, right? It's always about coming back to the presence of yourself, and whatever tool that might be for you, whether it's, tool sounds kind of weird, but it's just that, whether it is yoga or meditation or body work or energy work or body movement or dancing, whatever that is just brings you to the present moment of what you're doing matters in that moment. And it's freedom, right? It brings a smile to your soul. It brings a smile to your heart. And it just feels effortless. That's the effortless. It's not efforting, it's effortless. And a more buoyant way of being in the world, I think. So what would be, what would be one way that you deposit into your self-love way of being in the world? I know you mentioned a few things, but what's something that's absolutely non-negotiable that you do to fill up your love cup every day?
Just one.
Or 5.
Yeah, I would probably say that there's three. The one is that when I need time for me, then I need time for me. When I need space, I've been married for 23 years, very happily to an amazing man. And there are times where I actually need to have space and be on my own and allow myself to figure things out on my own. And so to be able to speak for that, just as much as I speak for my needs of, I actually need cuddles, or, like, could you make me tea because I'm running behind, whatever that is. So just that being able to be self-expressed to what my needs are is a non-negotiable, and being authentic and real with what my needs are. And that is really non-negotiable. And when I veer from that, everything shifts. So if I was to pick one, that would be it. Truly authentically expressing what my needs are. I would say my second one is that I am a family person. So for me, my kids are 23 and 19, so getting them to hang out with mom and dad is not the easiest thing to do anymore. But, recognizing, like, pre-planning ahead that, I want that family time. So for us, we play cards or hang out and be silly and ridiculous. And so, speaking for that and really creating the environment that they still want to hang out with us and be with us, that's a really big one. And we are coming to the time of them shifting out of our home at some point. I don't know what's going to happen right now with the pandemic, but, before this, our daughter was looking to move to London, England to teach. And so wow. I'm really present to how much that really matters. And then the third thing is, for me, really staying connected to my own breath, my own movement, and my own awareness, and not letting get that stuck into everything I know or I've learned or I've discovered, but newly, like, how is my breath newly right now without all that stuff, right? Like, I can get really, like, heady about it. Oh, what's my vagus nerve up to? Right?
Yeah.
And recognizing how my nervous system works. So for me, it's being with those things with the curiosity of a child and just listening newly for what's there. And then whatever's there is perfect. There's nothing to be done, but be with. So I would say those are my three non-negotiable ways of living.
Well, that sounds delicious to me. I love hearing that. I just love hearing how other people value their time and their space and what they do to fill up their soul. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with us today, or anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to wrap up our time together with?
Yeah, I think what's there for me, especially with everything we're going with, is to give yourself some grace. I, just as everyone else is, I'm on social media and in, groups and things and listening to people talk. And I think what I'm so present to right now is unnecessary suffering. And what I mean by that is that suffering because we're suffering. It's okay to suffer. You're a human being. It's actually our condition is to suffer. And we can lessen that suffering by not making it more than it needs to be, or by dishonoring it, or just sweeping it under the rug and pretending it doesn't exist. All those things that we do. So, give yourself some grace with everything you're experiencing. You're not alone. I think this is maybe the first time as far back as I can remember, like even 9/11, I know people experienced it, and so many people share with us their experience, but there are many others that experienced it completely differently. And I think for the first time in my lifetime, we're all experiencing the same thing at the same time. And so recognizing that this is not your suffering, you didn't make it up. It's not yours to hold or carry. So, give yourself some grace to be with it, and however you're feeling is how you're feeling, and there's nothing wrong, and you're not broken. There's nothing to be fixed. And just let yourself be with it. And if we simply just did that, what that makes available when you can be with your suffering, you can be with someone else's, and we all need that as well. So
and I think that's the biggest thing. It's not something that needs to be fixed right now. It's just, the gift. We are all gifted with the gift of time and the gift of space, and that's all we need to do, is just to absolutely be with ourselves, to be with our family, to be in our space, and to be in our bodies, and just emote, if that feels right. And, how can I be of service? How can we support each other? How can we support our families? How can we support a neighbor? You know, there's so many gifts that I've been seeing coming out of all of this.
Mm,
But it's also, you know, this is the time of great healing that needs to take shape as well. So just honor every part of it, everything that's coming up. There's no right or wrong way to be.
exactly. And
Mhm.
it's funny because when people ask me about that, I'm like, well, who created right or wrong? That's human beings. We rewrote language,
Yeah.
so we
Well,
made it
and
all up.
that's a whole other topic, but especially moving into, and I have this conversation with a lot of, you know, my mentors and colleagues is, you know, why do we have to live in a world that is right or wrong or win or lose, right? And I think we're starting to shift into true collaboration and connection because there's, you know, the energy of balance and equality. You know, there's no race that's above anyone else in this experience. There's no, you know,
Yeah.
different people are having very different experiences. You know, some people are experiencing loss, great loss in this experience.
Hmm.
And, you know, there is some trauma that's a part of it, but it's, you know, no one person is different from the other. Everybody's having their own experience in it. But the reality is we're all locked in our homes. You know, the lockdown is real. And, um, you know, there is so many gifts to coming out of it as well. And I think that's something we do need to eliminate is that the push and the pull, the right and the wrong, and
Yeah,
just be with what is.
totally,
Hmm.
totally.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for our time together. I always enjoy our conversations and our connection. And you know, if you want to connect with Melanie, you can absolutely go down. I'll post her link in the show notes. And so I made lots of notes too from this time, from our time together. Lots of great questions and insights. So I really value you and your time. And to our viewers, thanks for watching. I hope you find some value, and I would love to invite you to continue the conversation, to post in the comments below what inspired you, and please share it out to your community so that we can continue to bring hope, light, and love to the world. Until next time, abundant love.